February 1945, East Prussia, 18 degrees below zero. The city of Insterburg is now just a name on a faded map, crumpled in the pocket of a dead officer. Streets are covered in brick fragments and shattered glass. Smoke rises from basements where yesterday families huddled, praying the front would pass them by. It didn't. In a half-collapsed apartment building on Königstrasse, a man sits motionless in the darkness. His name doesn't appear in any Soviet honor roll. No photograph hangs in any museum. No medal bears his likeness. But for 48 hours, he held in his hands something more valuable than a battalion of tanks. He held the truth. His fingers are black with frostbite. The German officer's uniform he wears hangs loose on his frame. He's lost 15 kilograms in 3 months. In his breast pocket are documents that could save thousands of Soviet lives. Documents that reveal the Wehrmacht's final defensive positions, artillery placements, the locations of SS units preparing for a last stand. But between him and Soviet lines lie 48 kilometers of enemy territory. And he has 48 hours before the information becomes worthless. This is not a story of glory. This is not a tale that ends with parades and speeches. This is the story of a man whose name we'll never know for certain. The censors made sure of that, but whose final hours reveal something profound about courage, about sacrifice, about the invisible war fought in shadows while the world burned in daylight. His code name was Strelok, the shooter, but he would fire no bullets in his last 2 days on Earth. To understand these final 48 hours, we must go back to a Ukraine that no longer exists, back to 1920. He was born Mykola, at least that's the name in the few fragments of records that survived. A small village near Poltava. His father was a schoolteacher who'd fought in the Great War, who'd seen the old world collapse and tried to make sense of it. His mother was a nurse who'd treated soldiers from both sides and learned that blood all looks the same when it soaks into bandages. Young Mykola was small for his age, quick-minded, observant, the kind of child who watches more than he speaks, who remembers everything. His father taught him languages, Russian, of course, Ukrainian, but also German, taught from old textbooks salvaged from before the revolution. Languages are bridges, his father would say. Even when you cross them toward your enemy, they connect you to understanding. He could not have known how prophetic those words would become. Stalin's famine, the Holodomor, swept across Ukraine like a scythe through wheat. Mykola was 13. He watched his village hollow out. He watched his mother give her food rations to dying children, watched her grow transparent, translucent, until one morning she simply didn't wake up. His father lasted another 6 weeks. Mykola survived by becoming invisible, by stealing, by lying, by learning that to live, sometimes you must become someone else entirely. He made his way to Kharkiv, found work in a factory, slept in a shared room with 11 other workers, kept his head down, but he was noticed not for causing trouble, but for his languages, his quick mind, his ability to repair complex machinery by instinct. In 1937, when he was 17, 2 men in leather coats knocked on his door. They were NKVD, the secret police. Most people would have assumed the worst, but these men didn't come to arrest him. They came to recruit him. The Soviet intelligence apparatus was vast, brutal, and desperately in need of capable operatives. Stalin's purges had decimated the officer corps, including many experienced intelligence agents. The paranoia that gripped Moscow meant that loyalty mattered more than competence. But wars aren't won by loyalty alone. They needed people like Mykola, people who could speak perfect German, people who had nothing left to lose, people who had learned to survive by becoming invisible. He was sent to a training facility outside Moscow. The location remains classified even today. For 18 months, he learned tradecraft, how to build a cover identity, how to recognize surveillance, how to kill silently with a dozen different methods, how to resist interrogation, though they made it clear that capture was not an option. Dead men tell no tales, his instructor told him, but broken men tell everything. He learned to pick locks, to forge documents, to memorize maps after a single viewing, to read people, their fears, their weaknesses, their pride. But most importantly, he learned to disappear into a role completely. To think like a German, speak like a German, carry himself like someone who'd grown up in Bavaria or Saxony. When he graduated in late 1939, his instructors noted exceptional linguistic ability, demonstrates unusual psychological resilience, suitable for deep cover operations. 2 months later, Germany invaded Poland. The war everyone feared had finally come. June 1941, Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers crashed across the Soviet border like a steel tsunami. The Red Army, still reeling from Stalin's purges, was caught catastrophically unprepared. Entire divisions were encircled and destroyed. Prisoners were taken by the hundreds of thousands. Among them, deliberately, was Mikola. His mission was elegant in its desperation. Allow himself to be captured with a group of genuine Soviet soldiers, then volunteer for service with the Wehrmacht. It sounds impossible now, treasonous, but the Germans were practical. They needed manpower. They needed workers. And among the millions of Soviet prisoners, many of them Ukrainians, Balts, Caucasians who harbored their own grievances against Stalin, thousands would agree to collaborate. Most did it to survive. Some did it out of genuine hatred for the communist regime. Mikola did it to get close. The prisoner of war camp near Minsk was a circle of hell Dante never imagined. 50,000 men crammed into a space meant for 5,000. No shelter, no sanitation, soup so thin you could read through it. Men died by the hundreds every day from disease, from starvation, from random executions. Mikola spent 6 weeks there, long enough to make it believable, long enough to watch his body waste away until his ribs showed like prison bars, but not long enough to lose his mind. He volunteered for an Ost battalion, Eastern units composed of Soviet prisoners willing to work for the Germans. At first, just labor, digging trenches, loading supplies, but he was smart, educated, spoke flawless German. Within 3 months, he was promoted, given a uniform, assigned as a translator and administrator in a logistics unit. Imagine it. Imagine wearing the uniform of the enemy, saluting their flag, speaking their language not as a weapon, but as a skin you cannot shed, eating their food, laughing at their jokes, never able to let your mask slip for even a second, because the penalty isn't just death. It's torture. It's watching everyone you've worked with be executed because of you. It's knowing that your failure means others die. For 3 years, he worked his way deeper into the Wehrmacht's administrative machine. He was transferred west, then east again. He processed supply manifests, troop movements, casualty reports. And he remembered everything. Dead drops in occupied cities. Messages hidden in cigarette packs. Intelligence passed to partisan cells, who passed it to Red Army commanders who never knew the source. How many Soviet soldiers survived because Mikola warned them of an ambush? How many German operations failed because someone, somewhere, knew they were coming? We'll never know the full count, but his handlers in Moscow's center knew his value. Codenamed Strelok became one of their most productive assets in the German rear. By late 1944, the front was collapsing westward. The Red Army was advancing. Germany was dying, but dying hard, fighting for every kilometer, every city, every frozen field. Strelok's unit was pushed back into East Prussia. Insterburg, a city that was once peaceful, prosperous, proud of its Kant heritage. Now it was an abattoir waiting for its final slaughter. And it was here, in February 1945, that Strelok stumbled upon something extraordinary. February 12, 1945, 6:30 in the morning. Strelok is working in a Wehrmacht logistics office on the second floor of what used to be a bank. The building smells of damp stone and burnt coffee. Outside, civilians stream westward, refugees fleeing the approaching Red Army, carrying whatever they can manage. Old women pull carts loaded with photograph albums and copper pots. Children cry from cold. The German officers are burning documents. Orders from high command. Destroy anything sensitive before the Soviets arrive. But in their haste, they're careless. Strelok is tasked with carrying boxes of files to the incinerator in the basement. He's done this a dozen times. No one watches him closely. He's been reliable for 3 years. He's just another Ostlegionnaire doing his job. On his 4th trip, he notices something. A leather document case tucked behind a filing cabinet. It must have fallen during the evacuation chaos. The case bears the stamp of Army Group Center Headquarters. His heart doesn't race. He's trained himself too well for that. But his hands move with deliberate care as he slips the case under his coat. In the basement, near the furnace, he waits until he's alone. Opens the case. Inside are detailed maps, orders of battle, defensive positions for the entire East Prussian front, locations of ammunition depots, railroad schedules for troop movements, communications, protocols, and something else, plans for a massive counterattack. A desperate gambit by German forces to encircle Soviet advance units near Königsberg. If successful, it could delay the Soviet advance by weeks. Could cost thousands of lives. The attack is scheduled for February 15th, 72 hours away. This is the nightmare scenario for any intelligence operative. You have information that's immediately critically valuable, but only for a tiny window of time. After the 15th, these documents are worthless. The attack will have happened or not. The moment passes. Strelok has 3 options. 1. Destroy the documents. Stay in place. Maintain his cover. Continue his slow, careful work. 2. Attempt to get the documents to Soviet lines. Risk everything on a desperate run through enemy territory. 3. Sabotage the German attack directly. But that means revealing himself and certainly dying. He chooses the second option, but he knows his chances are almost zero. February 12th, 10 o'clock at night. Strelok leaves the office as usual. He's requisitioned a motorcycle for supply inspection duties, a common enough task that no one questions it. He has a travel pass, signed and stamped. He has civilian clothes hidden in a waterproof bag. He has the documents, wrapped in oilcloth, strapped against his chest. He has a compass, a knife, a pistol with 8 rounds. And he has a 48-kilometer journey ahead of him. The roads are clogged with refugees. In the darkness, illuminated by his motorcycle's weak headlamp, they look like ghosts, hollow-eyed, stumbling, carrying children who no longer cry because they don't have the energy. This is what defeat looks like. This is what empire collapse feels like from the inside. Strelok feels no satisfaction, only urgency. He makes it 30 kilometers before the first checkpoint. The guard asks for papers, demands to know where he's going. Strelok explains he's on supply inspection, heading to an ammunition depot at Gumbinnen. Orders from Colonel Hartmann. He hands over his documents. They're perfect because they're real. He forged the signature himself weeks ago, preparing for an emergency exactly like this. The guard studies them by flashlight, looks at Strelok's face, looks back at the papers, then mentions that the ammunition depot was evacuated 2 days ago. Strelok's mind races. He doesn't let his expression change. He replies that he'll confirm it's empty and report back. The guard laughs, tired and bitter, tells him he's wasting his time. Ivan will be here in 3 days anyway. He waves Strelok through. 20 kilometers to go. But now the roads are getting worse. Artillery has cratered the main highway. He's forced on his side roads, farm tracks, paths through frozen forests. And then, 8 kilometers from Soviet lines, the motorcycle dies. February 13th, 20 minutes to 4 in the morning. 8 kilometers. In good conditions, a 2-hour walk. But these aren't good conditions. Strelok abandons the motorcycle in a roadside ditch, covers it with branches. No need to announce his presence. He changes in his civilian clothes, a farmer's coat, worn boots, a cap. He buries the German uniform in the snow. If he's caught by Germans now, he'll be shot as a deserter. If he's caught by Soviets in German clothes, he'll be shot as a collaborator. The only way forward is to be nobody, a refugee, a ghost. He moves through the forest. The trees are skeletal, black against slightly less black sky. The snow is deep, sometimes up to his knees. Every step is exhausting. The temperature has dropped to -20. His fingers are numb. His face burns with cold. But he keeps the documents tight against his chest, wrapped in layers, keeping them warm with his body heat. He thinks about his training, about survival, About the instructor who told him, pain is temporary. Information is permanent. As long as you can move, you can complete the mission. Dawn begins to break around 6:30. Gray light filtering through clouds. Strelok finds a destroyed farmhouse and shelters there for an hour. He eats his last piece of bread, frozen solid. He has to crack it with his teeth. He drinks snow melted in his hands. His feet are frostbitten. He can barely feel them. But when he removes his boots to check, he sees they're still pink, not black. Not dead yet. He puts the boots back on and keeps moving. Does he think about home? About the village that no longer exists? About his parents buried in unmarked graves? Or does he think about all the soldiers whose lives depend on these documents reaching Soviet hands? Maybe he thinks about both. Maybe he thinks about nothing at all except the next step and the next and the next. Survival narrows your world. When you're this cold, this exhausted, this close to death, philosophy becomes a luxury you can't afford. You just move. Suddenly, gunfire erupts. Close. Very close. Strelok drops behind a fallen log. 50 meters ahead, through the trees, German soldiers. A squad, maybe 8 men, setting up a defensive position. They're digging in, preparing for the Soviet advance they know is coming. He can't go forward. Can't go back, it'll waste too much time. He waits. 1 hour. 2 hours. The cold is murderous now. He's shivering so violently he's afraid the Germans will hear his teeth chattering. He wraps his arms around himself, tries to generate warmth through friction. The German soldiers talk, laugh. One plays a harmonica. They're young, maybe 18, 19. They joke about girls back home, about what they'll do after the war. They don't sound like monsters. They sound like boys who want to go home. But they're between Strelok and Soviet lines. And they will kill him without hesitation if they see him. Soviet artillery opens up, a barrage that makes the earth shake. The German soldiers scramble, diving into their hastily dug trenches. Strelok runs. He runs despite the cold, despite the exhaustion, despite his frostbitten feet screaming with every step. He runs through the forest, branches whipping his face, snow spraying around him. Behind him, explosions. Screaming. The chaos of war. He runs for 15 minutes before his legs give out and he collapses against a tree, gasping, heart hammering so hard he thinks it might burst. February 13th, 2:30 in the afternoon. For kilometers from Soviet lines now. Maybe less. But those 4 kilometers might as well be 400. The forest ends. Ahead lies open ground, farm fields, now just white expanses of snow broken by shell craters and the wreckage of vehicles. This is no man's land, the space between armies, where neither side controls, where both sides shoot at anything that moves. Crossing in daylight is suicide. Strelok finds the ruins of a barn, collapses inside. He needs to rest, needs to wait for darkness. He checks the documents again. Still intact, still dry. He checks his pistol. 8 rounds. He's never fired it in the 3 years he's carried it. He hopes he won't have to start now. He sleeps, but it's not real sleep. It's the half-consciousness of extreme exhaustion, where you're aware of the cold, aware of danger, but your body simply shuts down for moments at a time. He dreams briefly. He dreams of his mother, thin as paper, placing a hand on his forehead. He dreams of his father reading aloud from a book in German, Goethe, maybe, or Schiller. He dreams of a girl he knew in Kharkiv before the war. He can't remember her name, only her laugh. He wakes in darkness. Full night now. Time to move. He crosses the fields like a ghost, slowly, pausing every few steps to listen, to watch. The snow helps. It's bright even in darkness, reflecting starlight. He can see fairly well, but that means anyone else can see him too. Machine gun fire erupts. Tracer rounds whistle past. He's been spotted. By whom? German rear guards? Soviet forward scouts? In the darkness, in the chaos, does it matter? He sprints, zigzagging, diving into a crater. Bullets kick up snow around him. Tracer rounds draw orange lines through the night. He crawls. The crater is half filled with frozen mud. His hands sink into it. He pulls himself forward, inch by inch, toward the far edge. The firing intensifies. Now both sides are shooting. A firefight has erupted across no man's land, and Strelok is caught in the middle. He presses himself flat into the mud, covers his head. Shells land close enough that he feels the concussion in his chest, like a giant fist compressing his lungs. This is it, he thinks. After everything, this is how it ends. Blown apart in a random artillery barrage. The documents destroyed. The mission failed, but the barrage passes over him, moves east. The Germans are targeting Soviet positions deeper in their lines. In the sudden relative quiet, Strelok moves. He crawls for what feels like hours, but is probably 30 minutes. His body is beyond pain now, just a machine that somehow keeps functioning. And then he hears voices, Russian voices, close, weapons being cocked. Soviet soldiers order him to stop. Don't move. Hands up. Strelok stops, raises his hands. Soviet scouts, 3 of them, young, nervous, their rifles pointed at his chest. One demands to know who he is. Is he German? Strelok responds in Russian. Soviet, intelligence operative, codename Strelok. He has documents, critical intelligence. He needs to speak to their commanding officer immediately. The soldiers look at each other. In the darkness, Strelok can see their suspicion. He's wearing civilian clothes. He appeared from German lines. He could be anyone, a deserter, a German spy, a collaborator. One soldier suggests they should shoot him now. Strelok replies that then they'll be shooting a man carrying information that could save 1,000 Soviet lives. Search him. Check the documents. But do it quickly, they're time-sensitive. The lead scout gestures. They search him roughly. Find the documents wrapped against his chest. One of them opens the oilcloth, sees the Wehrmacht stamps, the official German papers. He whispers, my God. February 14th, 2:30 in the morning. Strelok is brought to a forward command post, a reinforced bunker 3 kilometers behind Soviet lines. He's surrounded by guards. He's not treated like a hero. He's treated like a suspect. In Soviet intelligence, paranoia is procedure. Everyone is a potential traitor until proven otherwise. The documents are taken from him immediately, rushed to intelligence officers. Strelok sits on a bench, wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot tea that burns his throat. His feet have swollen enormously. The frostbite is severe. A medic tells him he'll probably lose several toes. He doesn't care. He made it. A colonel arrive. SMERSH, Soviet military counterintelligence. His face is hard, unreadable. He demands verification. Claims that Strelok is an intelligence operative, codename registered with Moscow Center. How long has he been operating in German rear? 3 years, 7 months. Since August 1941. The colonel proceeds with verification protocols. What is his control officer's name? Strelok doesn't know his real name. His code name is Voron, the Raven. What was the dead drop location in Minsk? Behind a brick in the north wall of the Church of Saints Peter and Paul. 3rd brick from the corner, 2 meters up. The colonel asks 6 more questions. Strelok answers them all correctly. But the colonel's expression doesn't soften. He mentions the documents Strelok brought. They're being analyzed now. If they're genuine, Strelok has provided valuable intelligence. If they're a German deception, he doesn't finish. He doesn't need to. And here is the cruel irony of intelligence work. Success looks identical to betrayal. A Soviet agent who survived 3 years in German service, who brought back documents so valuable they seem too good to be true. In Stalin's Soviet Union, that's not heroism. That's suspicious. How did he survive when so many others were caught? Why did the Germans trust him? Maybe he did collaborate. Maybe he is a double agent. Maybe the documents are planted, designed to lure Soviet forces into a trap. Strelok knows this. He's always known this. The moment he comes back, he becomes suspect. An intelligence analyst rushes in, excited, papers in hand. He addresses the colonel. The documents are genuine. They've cross-referenced with other intelligence. The attack plans match German radio traffic they've been intercepting. This is real. The colonel asks when the attack is scheduled. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They're targeting Soviet 47th Army positions near Königsberg. The colonel turns to Strelok and says simply, "You've done well." For words. That's all. No medal ceremony. No speech. Just 4 words. But in those words, Strelok hears something he hasn't heard in 3 years. Recognition. Belief. The Soviet command reacts immediately. Artillery is repositioned. Anti-tank units moved into place. The 47th Army is warned. Prepared. When the German counterattack comes on February 15th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it crashes into prepared Soviet defenses. The Germans are slaughtered. Hundreds of tanks destroyed. Thousands of soldiers killed or captured. The attack fails completely. How many Soviet lives were saved? Impossible to calculate. But thousands, certainly. Perhaps tens of thousands. All because one man walked 48 kilometers through frozen hell carrying documents wrapped in oilcloth. Strelok is transferred to a field hospital. His feet are treated. He loses 3 toes, as predicted. He develops pneumonia from exposure. For 2 weeks, he drifts in and out of consciousness. The war ends while he's still in hospital. May 9th, 1945. Victory. At a cost almost too vast to comprehend. When he recovers enough to speak, to think clearly, he asks the doctors what happens next. They don't know. They've been told not to discuss his case. 2 officers arrive. Not doctors. Intelligence. They speak to him quietly, respectfully, but firmly. His service is classified. He will receive no public recognition. He cannot speak about what he did, not to family, not to friends, never. The security of ongoing operations demands silence. He will be given a new identity. Papers. A job in a factory in the Urals. And he will disappear. Ekaterinburg, 1946. A man who is no longer called Mikola, who never answers to Strelok, works the night shift in a munitions factory. He operates a lathe. He's good at it. Quiet. Reliable. His co-workers know nothing about him except that he limps slightly and sometimes stares into the distance, as if seeing something they cannot. He lives alone in a small apartment. 2 rooms. A radio. Books in several languages. On May 9th, every year, Victory Day, he stands at his window and watches the celebrations in the street below. Children waving flags. Veterans wearing their medals. Music and vodka and tears. He does not join them. In 1953 Stalin dies. The paranoia loosens slightly. Some intelligence files are declassified. Some decorated, but not his. His file remains sealed. Even decades later, when other secrets are revealed, his name, his real name, never appears. Why? Perhaps because his mission was too sensitive. Perhaps because he knew things that subsequent Soviet leaders wanted buried. Perhaps because bureaucracies, once they classify something, often forget to unclassify it. Or perhaps because some stories are too honest, too real, too complicated. It's easier to celebrate heroes who died gloriously than to acknowledge the ones who survived in shadows, who did impossible things that can never be proven, never be shared, never be understood by those who weren't there. Ekaterinburg. An old man lies in a hospital bed. He's in his 50s, but looks 70. The years have not been kind. The frostbite, the pneumonia, the stress, they've taken their toll. He's dying. Quietly. Alone. A nurse asks if there's anyone she should call. Family? Friends? He shakes his head. No one. She asks if he was in the war. He hesitates, then nods. You should be proud, she says. You helped win. He smiles slightly. Doesn't respond. What would he say? How would he explain? He died on November 3rd, 1972. Buried in an unmarked grave in a civilian cemetery. No military honors. No speech. No recognition. For 50 years, his story remained unknown. Then, in 2019, a researcher working through declassified NKVD files found a partial record. A code name, Strelok. A mission, deep cover infiltration of Wehrmacht logistics. A final operation, intelligence delivery, February 1945, East Prussia. The record contained no real name, no photograph, no details, just a note. Mission successful. Operator survived. No further information available. We tell stories about war. Stories of great battles, famous generals, turning points everyone can identify. But wars are not won only on battlefields. They're won in basement offices where exhausted men sort through capture documents. In frozen forests where scouts risk everything to deliver a message. In the hearts of people who endure years of loneliness and fear, playing roles that could get them killed at any moment, all for information that might save lives they'll never meet. Strelok was one of thousands of Soviet intelligence operatives who worked behind enemy lines. Most of them died. Many were captured, tortured, executed. Some were discovered and disappeared into the Gulag, suspected of collaboration simply because they'd survived too long. The few who made it back often found themselves erased, their accomplishments classified, their sacrifices unrecognized. Because intelligence work, by its nature, must remain secret. Because the methods used today might be needed tomorrow. Because admitting what you know means revealing how you learned it. But their contributions were real. The intelligence they gathered, the operations they disrupted, the warnings they delivered, these changed the course of battles, saved countless lives, shortened the war. Strelok walked 48 kilometers in 48 hours to deliver documents that prevented a German counterattack. How many Soviet soldiers went home to their families because of him? How many children grew up with fathers because one man refused to give up, refused to let the cold or the exhaustion or the fear stop him? We'll never know his real name. We'll never see his face. We'll never hear his voice or know what he thought in those final moments as he lay dying, alone, in a hospital in the Urals. But we know this. He was there. He did what needed to be done. And in the end, when it mattered most, he succeeded. The war produced millions of heroes. Most of them died anonymously. Most of them are forgotten. Their names aren't in history books. Their stories aren't told in films. They're just numbers in casualty reports, entries in forgotten ledgers, names carved on memorials no one visits anymore. But every one of them mattered. Every act of courage, no matter how small, contributed to victory. Every person who resisted, who fought, who refused to give up, they all helped build the bridge from darkness to light. Strelok is gone. His real name is lost. His grave is unmarked. But his 48 hours, those final desperate kilometers through frozen hell, they echo forward through time. Because of him, thousands lived who would have died. Because of him, the war ended perhaps a little bit sooner. Because of him, somewhere, families remain whole. That's what heroism really looks like. Not glorious charges and dramatic last stands, but cold, exhausted, terrified people doing impossible things because someone has to, because lives depend on it, because giving up is not an option. Strelok, the shooter, a man who fired no bullets but struck the deepest blow, a ghost who changed history. We remember him not by name, but by deed, not by celebration, but by acknowledging that victory belongs not just to generals and soldiers on the front lines, but to the invisible ones, the forgotten ones, the ones who worked in shadows and died in silence. The war ended 79 years ago. The generation that fought it is nearly gone. Soon, there will be no one left who remembers what those years were like, what that struggle cost, what people endured and sacrificed. But stories remain, even incomplete ones, even fragments. And in those fragments, we can still hear the truth. We can still see the faces behind the statistics. We can still honor the courage that asked for no honor. Somewhere in East Prussia, now Kaliningrad, there are forests where Strelok walked, fields he crossed, roads he traveled. The buildings are different now. The people speak different languages. The borders have moved, the nations changed names. But the ground remembers. The earth remembers. And now, perhaps, we remember too. 48 hours to silence. 48 kilometers to freedom. One man, one mission, one moment when everything depended on someone no one would ever know. That's not just history. That's humanity. That's what we're capable of when everything is at stake. That's what heroism really means. Not glory, not recognition, just doing what must be done, no matter the cost, because it's right, because it matters, because someone has to. Strelok did that. And now, finally, his story is told.